Oh, welcome back, everybody, to Health Reboot Summit. And I have a very special guest again for you who's going to be talking about electronic pollution and EMF, something that I think should be on all of our minds. And whether we want to try lose weight, whether we want to get healthy or not, it's something that is really everywhere in our environment. So let me introduce you to Nick, the EMF guy Pineault, who is the #1 best-selling author of the Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs and an advocate for safe technologies. Through his unconventional approach blending humor, science, and common sense, he's becoming a leading voice on the topic of electromagnetic pollution, how it affects our health. For the last few years, Nick has been interviewing some of the best minds on health and technology and facilitating the creation of courses and educational materials to raise awareness on this very important issue. So thankfully, he is here with us to tell us more. Welcome, Nick. I'm so honored and glad that you're here with us on the summit.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. So, I would love to start with your story and how you got into this interest that you have in safe technologies and educating people about safe technologies and raising awareness about the impact of EMF pollution that we are all, impacted by. Or
Yeah, well, it started years and years ago, more than a decade ago. I started writing about nutrition. And for me, what really got me in nutrition, I think, is realizing how broken our food supply is when it comes to how agriculture is made, for example, and how consumers are ending up eating a lot of the pesticides that are spread on crops, for example. And I did not realize it at the time because I was in my young 20s, just starting to get into the laws and the reality of health policies, and everything is very, very complicated. And you realize that, well, there's such thing as safety limits for toxins. However, with as the years go by, that safety limit, they realize that it was not low enough, so certain people are exposed to more than they should throughout the years. And I realized that the way we roll out technology, whether it's cell phones or older technologies such as just pesticides and agricultural practices, is very wrong, in the sense that many times we roll out technologies first and without the proper assessment of really how it's going to impact the health of the population. And then sometimes 50, sometimes 100 years later, we say, oops, well, it turns out the science is in now, and we realize that all of these people are sicker than they should, or have lived an entire life sicker than they should, because of what we rolled out without much precaution. And oftentimes, when things are rolled out without much precaution, it's because you've got corporate interests that push for it because there's money to be made, for example. So I stumbled upon the topic of cell phone radiation and the safety of our gadgets and the radiation they emit in 2015 and 16. And what really shocked me again is I realized we're making the same mistake as we did with asbestos, as we did with leaded gasoline, for example. Gasoline with lead in it, like, who thought it was a good idea? And even at the time it was introduced, already there were scientists that were saying, no, 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 look, the early studies on lead show that we should not be exposed to a very small fraction of lead is enough to lower IQ in children, for example. So we should not add it to gasoline. No, 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 don't do it. And still they did it because it was cheap and it was convenient, and it ended up being a big fiasco. And even now it's impacting our children, it's impacting us because it's in the soil, it's everywhere. So these mistakes are hard to backtrack. The same thing is true for cell phones at the moment, and the way they've been rolled out. It was a big opportunity to change the world, and it did, because now we're connected in a way that's tremendous. I can have my smartphone, find my way around, have an entire library of knowledge on my smartphone. However, what is still underappreciated, and there are, again, the scientists screaming from the rooftops for 20 to 30 years, even before cell phones were introduced, there were scientists that were saying, well, we should have very stringent safety limits on the radiation they emit. And of course, it was a big incentive for the industry. There was a big incentive to say, well, we should not really look at that much because we need to roll out cell phones. They're going to be a hit. And now it's one of the most profitable industries when we look at telecoms and also big tech combined in the history of mankind. Equal, or some people say it's bigger than the entire pharma complex. So it is a big industry. And now we're in the middle of a very bizarre situation where more and more studies come out that show that our bodies are impacted in many ways that can directly interfere with your health goals. For example, weight loss, or just, being healthy in general is hindered by your cell phones and by these gadgets. And the science is out, but industry is still pushing to keep the limits the same, because changing the limits would mean a loss of profit. So we're right in the middle of where asbestos was maybe in the 70s and a little bit before that, when the controversy is mounting, but the policy is not following. I guess like cigarettes in the 70s and 80s, when the early warnings were there, but we're not at that point where we're going to have warnings on cell phones yet.
Okay, so I cannot wait to unravel how we actually, diminish that risk for ourselves, because, we have to start ourselves from, if the industry is not going to be there to change things right away. So
Definitely.
awareness is really fundamental. So, but let's start from the basics. What are EMFs?
Yes,
And what
I'm talking
happens to
about
the body?
Yes, I'm talking about EMF, electromagnetic fields or electromagnetic frequencies. And that's a radiation that is emitted by your cell phone to connect to a tower, back and forth. And also by, Wi-Fi routers, Bluetooth gadgets, anything that connect wirelessly. And there are also many other types of EMFs that we could get into, like the fact that if you're exposed to certain types of household electricity, there are also EMFs that are emitted by household electricity that can interfere with sleep, for example. So it's a vast and complicated topic, but the most recent example of the introduction of EMFs in our environment, and I like to call it electropollution, because it makes it a little bit more real for people. They understand pollution, and electropollution is something that we cannot see. Just like certain forms of pollution, not everything is smog. In fact, some of the types of pollution that are the most dangerous are those particles that are smaller, that can get into your bloodstream, into your lung, and that can damage your body. And sometimes that pollution is completely invisible and odorless, makes it even more dangerous, right? Think about it. You cannot really detect it and say, my God, there's something wrong in the home. I think there's a fire. That's convenient in a sense, because you can say that, oh well, this home is unclean. When it comes to EMS, it's more like radon or carbon monoxide, where you cannot smell it, you cannot see it. Most people cannot feel the immediate effect. Some people can, but most people feel mild effect or aren't really sure if they feel the effects. So if you're exposed by large sources of EMS, you don't necessarily feel it right away, but over time, it is a stressor to your body, and it will impact your ability to pretty much do anything. So when we look at the science, for example, of how EMFs could impact your body directly, one scientist in particular, Paul Héroux, who's a fellow French Canadian from Montreal, from McGill University, he calls EMFs metabolism disruptor. So they say, he literally said in 2018, they probably make us a bit fat. That's how he said it. And he said, I hope the industry will, I hope that women will forgive the industry for making them fat. That's how he put it. I thought it was very strong statement to make for a scientist. But basically what it does on a cellular level is that it will diminish your ability to produce energy. So you feel less energized, you feel more fatigued. But also, if you're trying to lose weight, it means that you burn less, right? So every day you burn less. So when you expose yourself to that stressor, it makes it that much more difficult to just stay at a healthy weight, or to get the weight off of your body if that's your goal. So this is the first thing. It's a metabolism disruptor. And then there's also a second part that's so important for weight loss is how it can impact your sleep. So if you sleep with your cell phone, or maybe you have a Bluetooth gadget, or maybe like most people, they have sometimes 5 or 10 different devices in their bedroom. It
Yes.
could be a Bluetooth alarm clock. It could be their cell phone, their husband's cell phone.
Mhm.
It's many different things. A thermostat that now is Bluetooth. A lot of these smart, so-called smart devices now connect wirelessly. Well, these sources add up, and the stress caused by these can directly interfere with your sleep. So a lot of people report, for example, when they get these out of the bedroom, just create distance between their body and those devices, they lower the electropollution in the room. And then they realize, oh my God, I feel more refreshed in the morning. I have deeper sleep. I have more dream recall. Well, think about how this is impacting your chances of weight loss over time. It is tremendous because sleep deprivation or bad sleep is directly related to your ability to control your blood sugar. So, and to repair and to
Mhm.
replenish your neurotransmitters and make sure that you're motivated to to actually go exercise, for example. So it's directly impacting your health in a
Mhm.
profound way, if only the sleep aspect. So just these two things, I think, contribute to weight loss or to weight gain in a massive way. But there's also one extra layer of how it might be impacting your hormones. And this is hard to believe in a sense, but certain doctors are realizing that some women are reporting that they feel symptoms of early menopause. And sometimes it's a few years before they should feel that early menopause and have hot flashes and insomnia or mood swings, or their skin doesn't look as good as it should, and things like that. They start experiencing all these symptoms. And certain doctors have identified that in many cases, you lower the EMFs in their home and the symptoms go away. So they thought in those cases that are more extreme, these women suffer from electro hypersensitivity, in the sense that they are so impacted by these EMFs that, in fact, once you remove the EMFs, their hormones go back in a more homeostasis place, in a normal place. And now it really begs the question, is it really early menopause, or was it electro hypersensitivity?
Mhm.
Well, maybe it's a little bit of both, right? Our hormones change over time for sure, but how can you keep your body healthy while you have a transition of your hormones is the question. And how can you keep a healthy weight while you do also, and not feel that your body is completely out of control? Well, controlling your EMF exposure is a good tool and is a good idea to really ensure that you have the minimum amount of stress on your body, because let's face it, EMFs is not the only stress that you're going through, of course. I'm sure most people listening to this conversation are very well aware, like I talked about, pesticides or heavy metals or maybe mold or and everyday stressors, responsibility, something is happening at your job, there's traffic, I mean, so life is stressful in general. If you add EMFs on top of it, you just make it that much more likely that it's too much for your body, and now your hormones cannot get back in a place that you feel optimal and you feel great on a daily basis, so it puts you out of balance. So this is really why EMFs in this modern world, maybe EMFs alone wouldn't be that bad, but added on top of all the other everyday stressors, it is just too much for certain people. And for those unfortunate women that are more electrosensitive than the average of the population, in their case, it is very critical that they start lowering their exposure. And also, the good news is they are the most likely to feel the immense benefits when they do.
Okay, great. It makes complete sense. On the summit, we talk a lot about toxins, toxicity, pollution, food toxicity, artificial substances, and all of that actually impacts our hormones and
Yes.
metabolism. But I'm very curious, and we don't have to go deep into the science of it, obviously, because of the limited time, but I'm curious, what actually happens in the body when it's being exposed to a large amount of EMFs and similar technology?
Yeah, it is very similar in a sense to other environmental toxins. And there are many scientists that have different models of that damage. Paul Heroux, for example, that I cited, talking about weight gain, he talks about the reduction of mitochondrial energy production. So the mitochondria inside the cell, even deeper, you have, I think it's 100 to sometimes thousands of mitochondria per cell in different types of, and there's a concentration, for example, in the heart, in the brain, in certain organs. And if these mitochondria are reducing their energy production, it can directly impact anything in your body. Your ability to just produce energy. Imagine is just your battery is always at 60%, like an old laptop. And you try to charge it 100% by sleeping, and you sleep and you sleep and you take care of yourself, and you wake up in the morning and no, I still feel 60%, right? So that's how you feel when your mitochondrial energy is very low. And this also, if there's other models that show that, for example, it stresses the cell itself at a cellular level with oxidative stress. And oxidative stress, you can create it pretty easily. If you go run for kilometers or have a hard workout, you're creating oxidative stress on purpose. And if you recuperate from that stress, then you have something marvelous happen. Your metabolism goes up, you have a hormonal response, you feel good, and but you got to repair from that stress. The problem with EMFs is it is unabated 24/7 exposure. So you do not recuperate from these exposures. It kind of accumulates until your bucket of stress is full. And what happens in the background is that your body is trying to mitigate that stress with your antioxidants levels, for example, especially our internal antioxidant reserves, such as glutathione or superoxide dismutase. And over time, these levels, imagine that these are kind of your inner shields, if you will, they go down. They go down over periods of years sometimes. And eventually, maybe you wake up 5 years later and you say, I don't know what's wrong with me, but every time I have a glass of wine, I wake up the next day and I'm super fatigued. Like you don't have any resilience, low energy, low defenses. And now you're in a kind of weak state where you feel older than you should. Your energy isn't as great. Maybe your sleep quality goes down. And that's when also you feel it in your hormones. And this is the perfect storm because EMFs acts in synergy in many times with other environmental toxins. So if you live in the countryside in a pristine place where there's no pollution, I don't even know if these exist anymore because pollution is global, right? So it is kind of a nonsensical scenario that I'm painting. But if you let's say if you detox from all toxins and you keep it very clean, you eat clean, and somehow you're able to avoid most of the toxins, then maybe you can handle EMS. But in most cases, people have multiple stressors they have to deal with, and these act in synergy. Even people that are more exposed to mold are known to develop EMF sensitivity over time. So this is really why I think it's becoming more and more critical to take at least preventative measures to lower EMFs, because even if you don't feel sensitive now, it is something that many people develop over time.
Okay, so I gather we are not going to be covering ourselves with tinfoil,
No.
but you have some better solutions. So let's talk about what are the best things that we can do to
Sure.
start
And
with it.
I know it feels a little bit daunting. Like, well, okay, some people, when they hear my message, they kind of say, okay, well, is it an all or nothing approach? I need my cell phone. I need my computer. Well, I'm in a computer on a computer right now. I'm recording this from Thailand.
Mhm.
I have a cable that I brought. Yes, these still exist. An Ethernet cable that runs from the computer to the router. And that's one way to connect to the internet more safely is to use wired solutions. And that's still possible, especially if you're at home, if you're not actively moving, you have a home office, for example. Most people that I know of that really well that haven't looked at my work too much and I guess haven't taken too much action, they usually use Wi-Fi because this is 99 point something percent of people still use Wi-Fi on the computer, even if the computer is not moving, even if it's a desktop computer. So instead, you can use wired technologies, and it's still possible to do this and to turn off the Wi-Fi on your computer. And why would you do that? Well, on a computer, I am exposed about 1 foot from the screen. So my exposure times how many hours in a week might be 40 hours a week. I'm an author. I'm in front of a computer. That's my life at the moment. And it will probably be for the next decade. So if I turn off the Wi-Fi on that computer, it means that my overall cumulative exposure of the week is going way down. So for me, the computer use is very important. For other people, it might be how much they use their phones. If in your profession you have to talk on the phone, then talking like this on the ear is a lot of exposure because you're very close to the source. The closer you are to the source, the more intense the radiation to your body. If you hold the phone in your hand at 1 to 2 feet from your head and you have wired solutions like earbuds or headphones, or even just use speakerphone if you're alone and you can do it, then you're cutting down your exposure by at least 80%, if not 90%. So right there, if you just change that, you ignore the rest, you don't even take care of your computer, just your cell phone use creating distance is very important. And I have to talk about the bedroom because obviously if these can be detrimental to your sleep, we need to talk about safe EMF hygiene practices. And the idea is to not have it within a arm's length, not have any gadget within an arm's length of your pillow. So I know some people and a lot of people fall to sleep with their phone. Maybe they look at things on the internet before. Even some people use meditation apps, and these are great, but please try to find an app where it can still work offline. And many of them exist where you can pre-download tracks and you put it on airplane mode, your phone that is, and it still works. And that way, it's safer that you have the airplane mode button on and also the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi icons are crossed off. And it means that these antennas will not be emitting EMF radiation during your sleep. So if you can only do that, for some people, this is enough to see benefits. And this is surprising because, of course, you're also exposed by external sources such as the neighbor's Wi-Fi and the cell towers. But these are not necessarily priorities at first. And that's important for everyone to understand, is that the closest devices to your body, the more exposure it will contribute towards your overall exposure. We're trying to cut that down. So focusing on the gadgets that you do have control over is a way better strategy than looking outside, seeing cell phone towers and saying, oh my God, these are scary, right? You cannot directly control the cell tower. You can get outside the city, and you should, when you can, for vacation time, spend time in nature, off the grid, disconnected, leave the phone at home if you can, right? So if only for the psychological benefits of cutting down on screen exposure. Some people feel so good after a few days. They feel liberated. Oh, I will not come back on social media. Like we all say that after a few days, and maybe we come back a little bit, but it just brings you back to yourself and to a better place with technology. So there's benefits to that. But when it comes to if you live in a city and you're exposed to gadgets, these are really the number one you should take care of first. And I'll also mention an extra action step because it's so easy. It is almost stupid. You can just disconnect, turn off your Wi-Fi router at night. And most people don't think about doing this. And sometimes they say, well, Nick, will it really make a difference if I disconnect my router because the neighbors don't do it? And you know what? It is true that it will make a difference, because your router is often the one that is closer to your body compared to your neighbors. In many situations, that's true, especially if you have a home and your neighbor is 1 kilometer away. But even in a city, it is still valid. And some people report better sleep even if they only turn off their own router and don't necessarily go ask their neighbor to do so, which is still a very bizarre thing to ask for in the 2020s, because people are not aware. But maybe you can still send them to this interview and educate them on the matter, but please be gentle, because of course, if you go to their door and say, oh, turn off your router, some people don't react good to that. Even within your family, I have to recognize that turning off the router at night might sound threatening to their internet. Well, how are we going to connect to the internet? Worst case scenario, you plug it back. It takes a minute, it comes back on. But maybe run it as a fun experiment. Like, I've heard that if you turn off the Wi-Fi at night, well, you do save that energy anyway because it's not plugged into the wall. And also, we might sleep better. And do an experiment for a week. And many people report better sleep. If they report better sleep and they experience it for themselves, it makes it more true for them. So this is something to do with the skeptical people in your household. And it's important that you introduce this not as something where there's all this bad radiation. Like the negative approach is dangerous sometimes, because we find that it can triggers the tech savvy and tech hungry teenagers or husband or wife in your household. So be gentle with it and maybe go with the benefits instead. Like, I've heard that if you cut down on EMF exposure, you feel better, more energy. It can help with sleep, rather than this is a class 2B carcinogen. Nick told me it's dangerous, and we need to remove that stuff because it's super dangerous. Some people will not react the right way to these messages.
Yes, I love your approach of thinking, what actually can be improved in my health, in my life, in my family's health.
Yes.
If we actually make this little experiment, just turn it off for the night and see how much better we actually start sleeping. And then it becomes sort of a positive mission and an adventure. So thank you so much for bringing that
Sure.
Just a different switch of perspective, because I think sometimes it can be so alarmist and so almost like there is a lot of scare. Okay, now we're overwhelmed with all this EMF, with the technology, with routers, with 5G, whatnot, and it's almost becoming, for us, it almost seems like we're becoming helpless, but it's never the truth.
Yeah, well, I agree 100%. And maybe a quick note on 5G. There's going to be a report posted with this, that I have a free report on 5G, because a lot of people, the buzzword now is 5G. And I will say to people, 5G is nothing to be scared about, in the sense that, for me, it is just one new version of a technology that had always been stressful to your body. So you don't need to think that 5G is somehow that much more dangerous than all other technologies. Is just as bad. And I mean, it's not good news, but we shouldn't talk about it in terms of hyperbole. A lot of people have done so on the internet, and it caused a lot of fear, I think. But 5G, of course, I'm not a fan of 5G at all. But the reality is that engineers are working on 6G and 7G. So we also need to stay intelligent about it. Even if we stop 5G and say, oh, I'm against 5G, and now we're going to turn back, look at the window, and there's 6G out there. Oops. Right. So in reality, we need to be for something, for safer technologies. And if you're exposed to 5G, some people think, oh, well, if there's no 5G in my city, I'm perfectly fine. Now I'm healthy and everything is safe. No, scientists have emitted concerns about cell phones being increasing your risks of brain cancer. And these studies were on 2G and 3G. Well, 2G is not really something anymore anyone uses anymore, and 3G antennas are being dismantled in the United States and throughout the world. So we're studying the older technologies and confirming that they were not safe in the first place. So do not be fooled into thinking that 5G is the one thing to worry about and all the rest is safe. This is really my key message here. All of it is equally bad and stressful, and for all of it you should do your best to reduce exposure. So regardless of if you have a 5G phone, I would just follow the same action steps. Create distance, turn it off at night. When you carry in your body or carry the phone on your body, do not slide it in your sports bra or yoga pants, or a lot of men put it in their shirt pocket in front of their heart. This is too much exposure for too long of a time. So make sure that when you carry it, it's on airplane mode, or you put it maybe even just in a bag or in a backpack is way safer. You create a little bit of separation. So regardless of 5G or any other technology, you should act the same way and demand that these things be safer over time. And this is something that is evolving in the right direction, but it will take a lot of time.
Okay. Yeah, and I really appreciate your perspective on that. We're exposed to pollution and technologies that are harmful potentially, but we at least need to take that time off and help the body recuperate and
Yep.
really limit that 24/7 exposure. And that's really huge because the body is powerful in itself. I want to remind everybody, it's not like we're completely helpless. We can clear pollution, and we can clear the damage, but we just need that time off. And I think that's really coming through for me from what you're talking about. And really briefly, I wanted to touch upon a subject of emotional impact of technology, because we are surrounded by, we mentioned a little bit, social media, and we're surrounded by electronics, and it becomes sort of like a substitute for life. What are your thoughts on that, and changing the perspective on how we interact with technologies this way?
Yeah, what I saw in the last 10 to almost 20 years, especially the last 10 since the advent of the smartphone, is that a lot of smartphone early inventors regretted having invented the smartphones
Mm.
and the platforms. And the main reasons that they cite often is we did not realize that it would work so well. How we designed them to be addictive, to be fun, to be irresistible, and they are. And now they regret it because they realize that everyone is glued to their phone. So if you feel addicted to your phone, like it is the, I think it's almost half of adults that self-report being addicted to their phone, almost sometimes with a love-hate relationship with their phone. Like, oh, I love what I can do with it, but also I do feel like I'm kind of imprisoned by it. That's a large fraction of the population. So if you feel that way, it was on purpose. It was on purpose, and it's not necessarily your fault. But if you get caught with it and you don't react, it will hijack some parts of your brain, and it will make it so that you spend a lot of emotional energy and a lot of neurotransmitter to check your notifications, and it will make you almost hyper vigilant all the time. So it is true that even a phone without EMFs technically could be something that can be quite detrimental to your health if you let it be. So making sure that you have controlled exposures to your phone, and not EMF exposure, but just overall screen time exposures, and a screen time that makes sense, where you can actually turn off your phone at a certain time, turn off the notifications after you leave your work, and make sure that you take this time off also, away from technology from time to time, and try to introduce your kids to do the same. I think that more and more people are realizing that there are downsides also to that marvelous technology, and it's becoming almost of a trend to disconnect and go on a Wi-Fi free weekend and these kind of things, even Wi-Fi free cafe shops that are appearing everywhere. So that's good, but we need to do it, and the benefits are real. And it's true that too much screen time exposure over time will really make you feel dull, and it kind of, I don't know, there's something psychologically that it's almost the junk food of reward, where you're looking at another notification, and then over time life is kind of gray, and it depletes you really over time. So you got to watch out, because it's kind of sneaky over a few weeks or a few months or a few years. It does, and then it's hard to go back and really feel excited about life.
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. That definitely life is so full of just marvels and so much outside. But if we just glue to the phone, it's really, we actually train our nervous system to never notice what's around us.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we're
that's
just
true.
kind of training this really sharp direct focus on the phone, but not a more broad experience of life. So thank you so much for bringing that. I think that I would love for people to who are watching today to take that to heart. And beautiful, Nick. Well, I know this is a subject that deserves a lot of information to be shared. And but can you tell us a little bit more about your projects? And I know you have a free gift, and how else people can learn about what to do with EMFs and how to protect themselves from technology.
Sure. Well, the free gift first, I kind of went into it and forgot to mention the title. Is called 5G in 5 minutes. So it's a quick report on 5G where you do have the scientific studies in there, but also easy tips to follow to minimize your exposure to 5G, what 5G is, what the towers look like, and a lot of information about 5G. But I like to call this the quick and rational guide to 5G radiation, so I'm trying to keep things very simple, very rational, not fear-based, and to be constructive about it. What can we do about it? And if people want more resources, there's always my book, The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. It's everywhere, online stores, Amazon, and the like. Also on my website, theemfguy.com. You can find courses. I have recommended products and whatnot. And my goal is always to make things more simple for the average layperson who gets into EMFs and wants to minimize exposure. That's still my number one goal, to educate the public at large. And yes, our goal is to have safe technology in the future. This is a longer battle. And in the meantime, I really stress the importance to everyone to protect themselves in the meantime. And it does not mean to freak out about technology or never use it, but just minimize exposure. Just like the way maybe you've come to terms with the fact that maybe eating organic will help you avoid a few of these food toxins you talked about. It's the same idea. You try to minimize your exposure, but eliminating exposure is not realistic or useful. So try to take it one step at a time and go from there, and just aim to get better over time.
Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your message today. I really feel uplifted, and like we have simple steps that we can follow and make things much better for us in terms of interacting with technology. And we all need to become more savvy about it, because it is a part of our lives. So we can't destroy it or deny it. We have to learn how to interact with it that actually is healthier for us. So this is the message that I'm getting. Well, thank you again, Nick, for coming up, and thank you everybody for watching. Please reach out if you have more questions, and please take advantage of Nick's free gift, and also look at his blog, because it is full of very interesting information that will help you along the way of your journey of losing weight, but also just creating a healthy life in general. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for watching. Please come back, and we'll see you soon.